Hello, good afternoon still. Thank you so much for joining me, Woman of Influence. I'm coming to you from the UK, so we're going to discuss some very important thing that is going on with our youth and our young ladies and gentlemen in the church. And I want to use this opportunity to see what we can do as a church to make sure that we don't lose our young and the youth that God have blessed us with. So it's going to be a blessing today. So please tag somebody to come into the video, share it with somebody. I have this wonderful young woman that's going to join me and talk about this wonderful topic that I think she and her husband is doing very well when it comes to the young adults and the youth in their church. So I want to use this opportunity to tap into her wisdom and the grace that God have given them, and what is making what they are doing work. So I'm in the UK, coming back somewhere next week. So whilst I'm here, anybody that comes my way that I think that they have something great to share with us as women of influence, I'm going to have them join me. So it's going to be a wonderful show. My husband is here too. If you have to come in, he will join in later. But it's going to be a very, very wonderful show. You will love this young lady if she's joined me. So please share the video with somebody, tag somebody to come in. And it's going to be a wonderful, nice, this is a special edition of Women of Grace. The whole this month of April, we're going to look at bitterness. Okay, last month we did betrayal. This one I want us to look at bitterness and what makes us bitter. And if you are bitter, how can you be able to get rid of it? Because it's something that if you don't deal with it, it will block your blessing. And the whole year, I've been saying that I believe that as women of influence and the men of influence, God have given us the year to prosper and to do a lot of things for the kingdom of God. But what happens if some of these things are not right in our ways? So we deal with betrayal, and we're going to deal with bitterness this month and see what we can do to position ourselves very well so we won't be bitter in life. So that's what we are dealing with it. But today is a special edition of Women of Influence, where we're going to look at our young and our youth in church. And sometimes it's very, very sad. They grow up in church, they are doing everything in church, and it's like they go out there and we lose them forever. I don't think it's a good thing. We have to make sure that as mothers, as grandmothers, everybody, we are praying for our children to stay with God. So what are some of the things that will really help them to stay with God, love God? Not just because we take them to church or we force them, you have to go to church, but they will really, really love God. So that's what we're going to do today. So I'm telling you, it's going to bless you. If you have a youth, you have a young adult, this is the time that you really want to be part of it. So I'm going to have my so my guest is coming to join me, and we're going to look at some of the beautiful things. Look at, I told you she's beautiful.
I went to polish for the camera.
Yeah, you're good. You're good. I told you she's beautiful.
So this camera.
Yeah, she's very beautiful, young woman. Very beautiful. Okay, so Women of Influence, thank you so much for joining us Welcome.
Thank you. I'm back here again.
Yes. The last year, I think it was June when I was here. Yeah, it was June when I was here. We did that.
Yeah.
So wonderful.
Yeah.
People really love you on Woman of Influence.
Wow.
You are here again. Thank you so much. We want to know your name and who you are. We don't know you. I don't know you. I don't even know you. So please let us know your name and who you are. Yes.
My name is Alberta Kukwa Ohima Esihene.
Oh, I love the human aspect.
Yes.
Yes.
I hardly use it, but
Okay.
and yeah, I'm
You're married to who?
married to. I was almost going to say I'm a child of God.
Which you are.
Who you are?
No, but I mean on a more natural
yeah.
level, I'm married to Pastor Kobi Esihene.
Okay.
Of Victory Bible Church, and we're both pastoring the youth church
Okay.
in London, Lewisham.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I don't want to be a little bit picky, but you have a child now.
Oh yes, and I'm a mother.
Yay!
I'm a mother now,
Okay.
by God's grace.
Oh, that's
And the
awesome.
last time we were here, I was pregnant.
Yeah, so now
I was pregnant, but
wonderful,
I'm a
wonderful
mother
baby
now.
girl.
Yes.
How do you feel
As a mom,
as a mom? How do you feel? How was the whole experience?
I don't know. It's just a unique feeling.
Okay.
Because I remember. I remember sitting down to myself and asking myself, if these are the things that I can do for my daughter, then I can't even imagine how much God has me on His mind.
Okay.
Because there was this one time that I had her baby monitor, and I was literally holding it everywhere around
Everywhere
the
you
house.
go.
I was I couldn't take my eyes off it because I wanted to make sure that she was okay, and if she's awake, then I can quickly rush in and everything. And then it just struck me that with all the attention that I give her, then it must mean a lot when I think of how much God has so much attention for us. But even apart from that, I didn't think I could love. I do love my husband very much.
Yes.
But it's a different type of love.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's not as though I love him less or more than my daughter, but it's just a different type of love, and I can't she's shown me the extent to which I can go for a person. Yeah,
wow.
That's it. Like, she's really shown me there are certain things that I didn't think I could do for someone, but she's shown me how far I can go for a human being, and it's a really beautiful experience. And
Wow.
I'm really happy.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So today I want us to look at our young adults and the youth, because you guys pastor the youth and the campus and the church and everything. I want us to look at it and that some of the things that we can do for them to stay in church.
To stay.
Some of the things they will stay in church, some of the things that will make them feel part of what God is doing. That they are not just there for their parents or there for anybody, but for themselves. So a young lady or a young gentleman who have started coming to church as a young adult or a youth, what can a pastor do to let her know the love of God, so they accept Christ and know the extent of the love of God for themselves, not for their parents?
I think a lot of times, obviously, if a young person is coming into church, say they've not really been grounded in church, so they're just getting to know God, it can be a lot for them to just walk into church and then automatically understand everything spiritual. So one of the ways that we go about it is forming relationships with the youth. making sure that we have that kind of personal, because in as much as pastor is preaching and delivering the word, there's just so much that they can take in at the moment.
Okay.
But when we're able to establish genuine relationships with them, and then they see a reflection of who we would love them to become in us, then it becomes easy for them to follow suit. Because the message is just 45 minutes maximum, and then the message is over. But when we form relationships with them, then we are able to portray a reflection of what we desire them to become like. So with young people, it's really more about keeping that genuine relationship and bond with them, because most of them have grown up in Christian homes. They've seen their mom and dad go to church, but maybe they haven't really been open to the experiences that they can encounter in Christ. I remember last Sunday, for instance, after the service, when the service was over, Pastor randomly said, if there were some people that wanted to speak in tongues, they could come forward. And it was surprising to know that there were a lot of them that didn't even know what all of that was about. Okay. You get what I mean? So when we come in contact with them, we're able to form that bond with them, then gradually they're able to, find their way in and then settle. Usually Sundays after service, even after the service is over, would have some of them come over to the house. Not because we just want to hang around and, but the closer we keep them, the more they're able to have that relationship and fellowship. I heard one man of God say, he said, most people stay in church not because of the message, but because of the relationships they have with people. Okay. So if the message, some would stay for the message, but if the message is good and they don't have true relationships with people, the love, the fellowship with the people that actually care about their well-being, checking up on them, after a while it's like,
I don't have anybody here.
So they go where the love is. So what we try to do is to extend that love to them and really model the Christian life to them. Because you can only say one thing and not be exactly what you're saying. So whilst you're speaking it, you're modeling it to them with the relationships that we keep with them. So that's one of the things that has kept when it comes to keeping.
Oh, okay. Please, if you are watching us, can you share the video? If you want to share your video,
okay,
you can go. You can go ahead and share your video. Yeah. So you can go ahead and share your video. Please try and share the video with somebody. Tag somebody to come in. We are talking about our youth and young adults, and we really want to see what we can do to help them to stay in church, love God for themselves. And the woman of God is talking about even having a relationship with them and also portraying Christ with our lifestyle to them. That's really helped them, you know. But I want to ask, because I think I went to a conference and the speaker was talking about young adults, and he made a statement that really touched me. He says that sometimes the youth feel that the grown-ups want to just use them. Like when it comes to social media, and those say, they know the youth can do it, but they don't feel like love. And the only thing that really will attract the youth is we showing them genuine love. Once we show them the genuine love, and it's not just about your gift. It's not about what you can do. I really love you and I want to see God in you. Then he was saying that it touched them for them to know that, you love me. So they will even go extend to do what you are even not asking them to do.
True. There was a time that my husband was telling me that one parent came to him and said, Pastor, I hope my child, he mentioned the child's name, he was like, I hope my child is behaving. And he said he just quickly responded and said, I'm with her only once a week. You're with her six days in a week. And that brings us back to what you were saying, that connection. If they just feel like it's all about the duty to service, so as soon as they come to church, it's like, what can you do? What can you do? What can you do? When it becomes a bit overbearing and a bit overwhelming, and they don't have a deep understanding of what they're doing, then that's when they feel used in the term that you use, because they don't really understand what they're doing. All they know is they've been told to do so and so. So like we were saying before, and like the pastor rightly said, forming that bond and relationship with them and extending true love. And when someone loves you, you can tell. When someone loves you, you know it. So extending that hand of, love to them and making them know that they're really accepted and they're loved. Then when they have to do something, it just comes willingly and it doesn't seem like duty. Because after a while, when you do something out of duty, it becomes frustrating. But when it's out of love and understanding, it becomes a part of you and you actually enjoy what you're doing. And in that way, you're even able to replicate it in other people and tell other people to also help you come do the same thing. But if not, then it's just duty, really. There was this young girl in our church who had been a leader for quite some time. I'd say well over a year. And it got to a point I thought she could do more at the level that she was. I thought she could do more, so I was pushing her to do more. And surprisingly, she said she doesn't even understand what being a leader is. And it took me by surprise, because sometimes we just assume. Parents and the older ones assume that the younger ones should know without teaching them or guiding them. So you'd have to make that investment in the young ones. It's true they know wrong from right, but when it comes to spiritual and biblical principles, you'd be surprised that they actually genuinely do not know what it's all about. So giving them that understanding, them teaching them and modeling that example, because unfortunately, when you go into a church, you would easily see most of the young people doing the work. So if you go to the choir, for instance, you'd have younger people doing it, or the various departments, you have younger people doing it, and it doesn't send a good, I wouldn't say a good message, but it's not a good example if they are being told to do something that the people telling them to do are not even doing themselves. So that's when the term being used comes in. So it's like, it's service for the younger ones and the listening of the message for the older ones. So bridging that gap and making everyone understand that really in all is service to God. Then that way you don't feel used in that sense.
So how do typical youth service need to be run? Do you want them to be part, do their own thing, feel part of it, feel that they are serving God in their ways, like now typically the youth are doing so many things that normally we as grown-up, we don't even have an idea. So do we have to give them the room to operate and do what they do, but at least the message and everything is still intact?
I don't quite get it. When it comes to, is it
when it comes to a typical youth service,
right?
How do we give them the room to operate it kind of themselves?
The setup, should it be
like the setup, the setup,
the song, the music,
songs,
because the challenge has always been our parents worship a certain kind of way. They do church certain kind of way. Can we create an atmosphere for them to be able to come, express themselves, The content is still the same. The message is still the same. However, the setup and the environment is youthful, it's inviting, it's not boring, and they don't need to come and sit down there in the pew, you know. So, from your experience, what you and your husband are doing,
right.
How do we set up, and what is your setup is like? Is it the same traditional way? You come, you set up like in a theater form, somebody comes, tells you.
Well, for our auditorium, the setup, if we're talking about the setup, it's pretty much like the adult service, but the adult service is a youthful one. Okay. It's not full of young people, but it's youthful.
Okay.
And like you rightly said, I mean, Paul also said the same thing, that he became like them to win some.
Yes.
So if you want to win the youth, then you must be youthful.
Okay.
You can't impose the traditional order of service to young people and expect them to comply. Okay. If you want to win the youth, you have to become like them, understand the things they like, understand the songs that they sing. I mean, you can't bring the songs that our grandfathers and grandmas sang. So understanding the trends and the times, evolution of culture, how things have changed over time, and understanding it, and then incorporating that into the service. Because interestingly, when you make that open for them, you'd realize that they come up with so many creative ideas.
Okay.
I mean, typically back in the day, a typical church would have just say ushers, choristers, intercessors. I think those would be the basic three. But in the youthful church today, there's so many departments. There's a creative arts, there's social media department, there are musicians, there are people who are in charge of interior setup, there are even event planners in the youth service. When you give them that room to operate, you'll be surprised how they can bring their individual unique giftings to serve in the body of Christ. Okay. But if you're very stereotypical about it as to this is the way things should be done, you would easily cut them out without even realizing. So what we also do is we make them aware that we are open for new suggestions and new ideas. So through that's how we were able to form a department like events department. Okay. So there are people who naturally like planning events, putting things together. I mean, the young people are very energetic, so getting them on the go, getting them to do things, and surprisingly, they have quicker ways to do things than an adult would.
That's true.
With technology, quicker and faster ways to do things. So when you open it up to them and tell them that, you know what, we want to make your gifts and talents useful to the body of Christ. How can you serve? You'd be surprised the ideas that people come to you with. Wow. So many creative ideas. And then again, with the recent use of social media, I mean, all the young people are on social media now. So that is one of the, I would say, the main ways that we reach out to young people. Typically, when a new person comes to church, we would ask them to give us their contact details, etc. But I realized that when you send them text messages, like the regular text messages, they don't respond because they're on Instagram, Facebook. Oh. So, I mean, traditionally, you would think that send a text message is the right way to go. But how about...
They don't read it.
They don't read it. It's not effective.
Yeah.
So you've done the right thing, but it's not effective. You've taken the data, you've sent out the message, but it wasn't effective. It didn't yield any results. Wow. So what you want to do is to reach them where they are. If they're on Facebook, how about send them a Facebook message and communicate with them there? Or if they're on any other social media platform, or even if they're at events, how about organizing the events the way they organize it? That way you're meeting them where they are with the things that they love, you know, the type of music that they love. Or last 2 weeks, there was an event for young people. And even though it was a Christian event, it was centered around entrepreneurship.
Okay.
So we didn't necessarily say that you're coming to church, but we said there was going to be an event for people who had business ideas. And when they came together, it was addressed from a biblical perspective.
Mm-hmm.
In an event like that, someone will easily stay because they know that the church has their interests at heart as well.
Okay.
But if it's all one way and very straightforward, then it's very limiting, and then eventually you lose a lot of.
There's a question here for you. Someone said, my question is, how can, as the youth, be comfortable in the church? Any ideas?
How can they be comfortable
At church.
At church.
In the church. In the church.
How
In the
can-
church.
You know, like you rightly just described, some churches are set up in such a way that with all the current innovations that are coming, social media, for instance,
Yeah.
some people don't even believe in social media. Why should my child be on Facebook or even be on Instagram and blah blah blah, and then so there's nothing youthful. It's like there's a culture inertia. How do we break out of that and don't lose the content of the message of the gospel? However, we are open to ideas, and the youth can come in and still be youthful. You know, we don't make grown-ups out of youth, and they are missing their youthful excitement, interacting with one another, doing cool things, funful things, because sometimes some of the youth are afraid to give their life to Christ because they think if I give my life to Christ,
they're going
life
to
is
look
gonna
like auntie and
exactly. So I don't know what you have to say.
I think it goes around that.
Apart from the youth service that we're in, we're also in the adult service, VBCI UK, and our senior pastor, who's also the pastor in charge of all the youth in VBCI UK, Reverend Kobold. Usually what we used to do was would have a meeting, and one of the ways that he bridged the gap was through communication.
Okay.
So after a service, he would have the adults in the same meeting with the young people who are in charge of, say, various departments, and communicate the idea to them. For instance, something like music. For lack of better expressions, the older generation loves the audacious home songs. Because they say home, the typical, the spirit, and maybe they may not necessarily connect very well with the modern contemporary songs. That have, evolved these days. Sit down with the adults, sit down with the youth, and let them communicate. Because what we realized was the adults actually do love the type of songs that they love. And I mean, when you raise a song like that, they are all over the place. But when the youth communicate their vision to the adults, then they understand. Because really, like what Pastor Bishop was saying, that is about not losing the message. When you listen to some of these songs, even though they don't sound like the typical traditional songs that the adults would love, they still communicate the message. And the praise and the worship is not necessarily about the tune, it's about the message that we're giving. So it's about time that we communicated, sat down and bridged that gap. If at the end of the day what we are trying to do is to communicate the message, then we should be willing to learn and unlearn certain things. Things that we are falling in love with over the years, we should be able to abandon some of them and then pick up new ideas and new trends, so that we can be able to win the young people, because trends are changing. I mean, back in the day, things that were applied that were working is not necessarily the things that are working now. So like the sister was asking with the young adults and how to get comfortable in church, communicate. I think the adults should communicate with the young people. If it has to even do with certain things that might be as trivial as, say, dressing. That she is wearing a pair of jeans to church doesn't make her any less unspiritual.
Yeah.
She doesn't necessarily have to appear in a certain way for her to. So it's really communication and understanding the changing trends of, culture over time. Yeah.
Okay.
So communication.
How do we help our young with what is going on, especially in school, the bullying, and some of them being,
In guns,
depressed, and all those things. And sometimes they feel like their mothers and the grown up don't understand what they are going through. Like they say that I'm depressed, and my mother don't even understand why are you depressed. What is making you depressed? You don't pay bills, you don't do anything. What is making you understand? But sometimes they go through those things and they think that the grown ups, don't understand it. What can we do to help them?
Number one, communication, like I said. There was a young lady that I was speaking to, and she was telling me about some of the challenges that she encounters with, depression and stuff like that. And I was telling her that where I was born and raised in Ghana. I mean, in Ghana, I couldn't picture myself saying I was depressed. It's like it's not a language that is understood. But since I came to the side, Western culture, I realized that they easily put labels on things.
Okay.
They easily name things. So, for instance, someone is going through, it might be seasonal. Someone is going through something seasonal, and all of a sudden, you label it. And as soon as you label it, it forms an identity on you. And before you know it, it's actually bigger than you actually thought it was. So I told her something like depression. I wouldn't expect her to confess that she's depressed, because she'll be surprised to know that there are certain things that she is going through now that people who are older than her have probably gone through it. But because she's not communicating those things to her parents, she feels like it's peculiar to her. So she feels like it's my problem, it's a unique problem to me. But you'll be surprised that a lot of the things that the young people are going through are things that the adults may have experienced, maybe not to that degree, but they may have experienced. And if they are able to communicate with the younger ones, it will be cut short before it grows into an ugly beast. So things like depression, you find very young adults being suicidal.
Yes.
It's really because they haven't had anyone speak and relate to them on a certain level. But if the adults can also come, for lack of better expressions, come down to their level and talk to them about day-to-day basic things, about how they're feeling, how their viewpoints on even church, for instance, like we're talking about church. How do you feel about church? You'd be surprised that one young person will say that, oh, maybe it's not my thing. And when they say it's not my thing, what do you understand by them saying it's not my thing? Maybe it might be something as small as the type of music, or even the appearance, how people appear in the place, or maybe the setup. There was this church that I went to, and they had lights. So they had, you know what you typically see? I've not been to a disco before, but I have an idea of disco lights. What would typically look like a disco light? I mean, if it's what their interpretation of excitement. How do we incorporate those things into the setup to make it a bit more youthful than, then again, going back to the stereotypical adult
typical setup
setup in service. But most importantly, the adults should be communicating with the youth, having a conversation, on a day-to-day basis and understanding where they come from, understanding how they think, but most importantly, coming down to their level.
Let me ask you a question. Is the church influencing the youth in our society today?
Yeah.
When we came, we heard the news about knifing, and it was
About
knifing.
yeah.
And there was even a seminar that was being held to try to see how they could avert, educate the children not to do those kind of things. Is the church having an impact on the
that
youth?
area.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the areas that we might have to go into outside the typical church setting, because then again you can't. How do I explain this? I mean, the whole sermon cannot be about knife crime. If you go to a youth service,
Okay.
the whole service cannot be about depression. The whole service cannot be about suicidal thoughts.
Yeah.
But so let's say for our church, for instance, the youth church, if you're able to organize events outside the typical Sunday church setting, then you're able to reach them and communicate the message to them about, and educate them and speak to them about the things that they need to be aware of and how they can escape these things. So for instance, things like the last time we were talking, I spoke about things about say career. Someone might be overwhelmed and might be feeling depressed, because when you go on social media, you see a lot of people putting up, oh, I'm in this country, I'm doing this, I'm here. It's like they're living their best life. And maybe when you look at yourself, you've not got everything that you're seeing online. It makes you feel like you're left out to yourself. How do we gather the youth and enlighten them on some of these things? Because then again, I said it possibly could not be in a typical church setting, but then organizing events outside the church setting, still under the ministry, but outside the church setting. If it's in their schools, if it's in open venues, wherever it is, but going outside, the church setting, then that way would be able to communicate to them a bit more. So I think that's one of the things that we have been adapting recently, is to organize events outside typical.
But how do you address the, some people feel like if with all these things that you suggesting, then now it looks like we diluting the gospel, and you literally more or less like trying to bait people to come in without really changing their inside. So it's like it's a cosmetic way of luring people into the church without really, and that's somebody with a typical traditional way of, Charlie, if you are saved, then we have to see these. Why should we put let's say a worship light and create? Why
should we do all these nice things
exactly,
to get
exactly.
cosmetic?
And so they accuse you of more or less watering down the gospel, quote and unquote, based on their understanding of how a church is supposed to be, and so how do you address that? Because it's a form of accusation, which I think is irrelevant anyway, because I don't. But if somebody is watching this, how do you defend the church?
It's really interesting. But I mean, when you were talking about it, one thing that some people encounter God and there's a drastic change and turnaround. And for others, it takes a while. And we have to be very accommodating of that. Bishop Clement teaches us about all-inclusive living. And he says that the reason why we're not able to reach a certain group of people is because we have not become like them, or we have not opened ourselves up to them. So he's saying, for instance, he's given a typical example like, if all you know is just come to church on a Sunday and then go to work on a Monday, where is how do you expand your circle of friendships?
Yeah.
He's not necessarily saying go to parties or go out of your way and do what is not accepted. But how do we accept everyone as they are? How do we live a life that is inclusive of every other person? Because then again, like the Bible says, Jesus was a friend of sinners.
That's it. And
He sat with them, he ate with them, and to the critic, the person that looks like the message is being watered down is the one who is sitting outside looking at Jesus saying he's probably sitting with a prostitute, having a conversation with a prostitute. It's not because he's not allowed to have a conversation with a prostitute, but the end goal is to deliver the message of salvation.
Exactly. And however you deliver it.
And then
then the duty lies on the churches to make sure that when we have done all that we can to get the people in, we give the message as it is in all purity.
That's right.
Perfect.
In creative ways, and Bishop Taki Yaboy, the mission statement for Victory Bible Church says, in all creative ways, developing people into fully functional followers of Jesus Christ. So in all creative ways, if you can get them in, then you can deliver the message. But if you are a certain type of way, that like people say, you attract your kind.
Yeah. That's it.
So if you want to win the lost, you would have to make yourself open and available and approachable for them to come in. But if you are a certain type of way, then you're only going to attract your kind of people. So he talks a lot about, all-inclusive living. There are people, when you look at the typical African culture, there are certain things that are not accepted, like, say, piercings, tattoos, a certain type of dressing. If you're going to criticize and say that by someone's appearance they don't look like the church type, that's where you already lost that person. But if you see them as a soul that is valuable to God, you look beyond the outward. Because your target is, how do I reach the soul? And so in all creative ways, you get them in, and you'd be surprised that when they come in, they're very spirit-filled, and you almost forget that they have all those things that don't look, in quote, acceptable with the typical African culture.
Here's the follow-up question. You spoke about communication. I see a barrier in communication in the sense that sometimes the youths have certain jargons and terms they use that their parents don't understand. And so that in itself also becomes a barrier. How do you advise both sides? Number one, like parents trying to understand the trendy words. For instance, me when I'm texting, these guys, you have all those mojos and terms and short forms. I don't understand all of these. But in your text language, you can just use one facial expression or mojo, and it says a thing. I don't even understand what they are. And then also, how can the youth also try to reach their parent? Especially those who are in the diaspora, who give birth to their children here. All they know is what they were raised in back from Africa, and they are trying to also raise their children, unfortunately, in a different culture. So they have to blend too, which makes it a bit more difficult. However, how can the youth help their parents to understand them? And how can the parents also meet their children to try to understand it so there can be an effective communication? Because the breakdown has always been the communication. How do we deal with that? Because you have lived both worlds. Wow.
With the parents reaching the youth, I would say they might have to drop a certain level of expectation.
Okay.
sometimes when you expect your children to be a certain type of way, it puts a lot of pressure on them.
On them. Okay.
And the way society has evolved, parents are usually not always with the children. So when you talk about things like communication, like with social media, etc., when you're communicating with your child, you don't communicate via text. I mean, you communicate in person.
Yeah.
So when they're using certain terms or certain emojis, because that's not their medium of communication with you, you realize that you are lost out on the mode of communication. Take off that expectation that I lost my train of thought. The expectation I was talking about was with behavior. When you spoke about me coming from the typical African setting and then into the Western culture. I was speaking with my mom the other time, and when I was in Ghana, I didn't have a certain way of communicating with her.
Okay.
When I came here, she noticed that the way I communicate with her has changed.
Okay.
And this is actually positively. When I was in Ghana, I hardly used to speak to her from a heart posture. And that was because in the typical Ghanaian setting, you are expected to speak to the adults or the elderly in a certain way.
Yeah.
Okay.
Even typical things like in the African setting, you can't ask an adult, how are you? So when they say, oh, maybe Koko, how are you doing? I'm fine, thank you. And that's where it ends.
Yeah.
You're not allowed to ask, and you too, how are you doing?
Yeah.
It may seem a bit disrespectful.
Yeah.
So looking at things like that in a typical African setting, or maybe out of the Western culture, you'd realize that there's a certain expectation of how children should behave towards adults. There are certain things when it comes to culture that we must maintain with respect for the elderly, etc. But when it comes to communication, there are certain things that the expectation that has to be dropped for the parents, from the child to the parents, so that they can be able to freely express themselves. Now I realized when I came here, my trend of thinking, I've had a bit of a paradigm shift.
Yeah.
So when I'm speaking to my mom, I speak to her as though I'm speaking to my friend.
Okay.
I'm able to communicate with her what I feel, how I think. If it's right, she would accept. If it's wrong, she would correct me. But where it's like certain things should not be said
at all,
is not said. You lose what's really in their hearts, or what's really in their minds that they want to communicate with you. And then when it comes to natural forms of communication, like the jargons or the terms that we use, if you want to understand someone's language, you must communicate, you must spend more time with them and communicate with them the way they communicate. How about maybe whilst they're out of the house, you send them a text? Because if you send them a text, then you'd be able to understand these
things,
emojis,
and the terms that they use. Your child might say something and you'll be like, oh, what's the meaning of that? They'll be like, oh, mom, it means this. Even like Mama Bishop, every time we spend a lot of time in the kitchen, every time we're in the kitchen, because she's around us, she's heard us use certain, and as soon as she hears the term, she will ask, oh, what does it mean? Or we'll say, oh, mom, it was live. She'd be like, what do you mean by it was live? It means it was fun, or it was exciting.
Yeah.
So every time we use certain terms, she would ask. But then you'd have to be around them to be able to understand. And if it comes to texting, why don't you try texting them and see how they communicate on phone with the kind of emojis they use. But in as much as you're not spending so much time with them, there's nothing more important than the quality of time that you're spending with your kids. Maybe with the nature of your job, you might not necessarily have that much time to spend with them. But if it's just an hour or two, really sitting down to talk with them, asking them about their day, how they're doing, it opens that ground for them to be able to communicate freely. And what we as young people must also learn from adults is that when it comes to certain things like culture, there's certain things you cannot take away.
That's good.
And there's a proverb, African proverb, that says that the old man sitting on the tree. Even the old man can see further ahead, even than the young one sitting on a tree.
Good.
Experience. We should understand that no matter how much culture has evolved, your parents have probably lived twice your age. And they have seen things that you haven't seen. I mean, how many times have we as young people caught ourselves thinking, in fact, I don't even know what I was thinking 2 years ago.
Exactly.
You catch yourself saying, oh, I really made some dumb decisions. I was on Facebook and they sent memories. So they'll send you maybe your status 5-7 years ago. And honestly, I remember telling my husband, when I read some of my statuses, I'm just asking myself, what was I thinking? Like, I mean, some of the things that I said, I mean, even yesterday, I sent a screenshot of one of my memories to my friend. The things I used to say, I couldn't believe it. It didn't make sense. So you should understand that in as much as trends are changing for us young people, adults, maybe we might have the skill or, the trend or whatever, but it can never beat the adult's experience.
And sometimes that could be a challenge and a conflict between the youth and their parents, where they think they know they are smarter, and they think that their parents are caught in
old ways,
and they are embarrassed. It's like you having an iPhone, somebody's carrying, press button, old type flip phone, and daddy hide the phone. I don't want my friends to even see that you're carrying that kind of phone. Well, here's the question as we try to wrap up. And how do you express your feeling to your Ghanaian mother?
My feeling.
That's what
that's a question. Like,
what do you mean by
feeling?
Like
the way you were talking about being able to express yourself to your mother, and you gave an example that how you now communicate with your mother even sees the change.
Yeah.
Sometimes the typical inexperienced African parent can be dismissive of their child's real feelings. So the child gets to a point where they think that nobody's listening to me, nobody hears me, nobody knows what I'm feeling, because you want to talk, shut up, or you want to talk, keep quiet. So you don't get to express yourself. They're dismissive, they don't listen to you, they don't let you talk and speak your mind, whether they agree or disagree with you. At least let me express myself, hear me out, let me know hear me out and feel what I'm feeling, whether you agree with me or not, so you can be able to help me. Sometimes the typical African parent can be so dismissive because we have a certain trend of thinking. Why should you even bring that? How do you deal with that? Do you understand what I'm trying to say?
Yeah. So you're asking, how does the young one
get the mother or the parents to understand?
Don't stop saying it. That's one of the things I'd say.
And I also believe that there are different forms of communication. If you communicate in one way and they're not getting it, then maybe your method too can also be wrong. Because sometimes if your parents think that you use a certain kind of facial expression to get their attention or take things away from them, then when you're using that method, it won't work. And so you can use a different way of communication, or talk to your dad, or talk to any of your siblings, your auntie, or even your pastors, Yeah, I'm trying to get through to my parents, but it looks like they're not taking
They're
it
not
seriously.
hearing.
Can you do this thing? Because what we also don't want to do here is that when they think that their parents are not listening, it pushes them to a darker world of the social media.
Finding answers
Exactly. Elsewhere, where they now want to go build friends on social media. And you know, the dangers of social media. Maybe the next time, you know, before we leave, you guys can do something about the dangers of social media. Because we've heard of stories where predators and molesters and all these evil people disguising themselves as young adults and youths and using fake profile pictures to try to lure, you know, the youth.
The young ones.
And that's why for me, I want to do anything possible to be able to create an environment for my children to be able to approach me. In fact, I feel uneasy when they don't feel comfortable talking to me. And so I want to go to them, find out, hey, what's going on? Why are you not talking? Blah, blah, blah. You know, so I think that if you are not getting your parents' attention because of their way of thinking, then you should try to talk to your pastor, talk to an auntie, talk to an uncle, somebody to get their attention and what have you. We've seen some people too, when they think that nobody's listening to them, they start, you know, some illicit habits, you know, drinking, drugs, and cutting themselves and hiding it, going to their room, locking themselves, you know, listening to certain kinds of music, starting watching certain kind of shows just to bury their pain. And you know, it's wrong. Those ones are wrong completely. So I want to suggest that find a different way of communicating and try and talk to your pastor, uncle and auntie who will take you seriously and listen to you seriously.
Sometimes also in the home it can be about timing.
Yeah.
It's finding the right time.
Okay.
to speak to your parents, learning their moods when they are in a comfortable mood to speak, and when they're not. The timing might be wrong. And whilst you were mentioning speaking to other people, one of the ways that, for instance, if there's a relationship, a parent-child relationship that's already struggling because the communication isn't there, what the parents can do is to find out who their friend is closest to.
Okay.
Because sometimes the things that your child may not tell you, obviously because they're under the same roof and maybe they feel vulnerable, the person that they're close to might be able to disclose it to you. So even in our church, I've realized that what some of the parents do is they've told us to speak, because we can relate with the young people on a certain level, when we're able to open up with them, if there's anything of concern, then we can communicate to the parents.
Okay.
So the parents should also be well aware of the circles of friendships that their children keep. That way, if there's anything alarming, they know. If they've noticed any odd behavior, then they know who to speak to. But then again, we the young ones, if we can't speak to the parents, should be speaking to.
How about those who over spiritualize everything?
Like the parents, you know, like they don't even want. Sometimes it's sad, you know. They don't even want their typical young adults or youth to even go to the movies, because they think out of there they are demons, you know. So I mean, it's something. So it's like you have to be in the house, from the house, maybe go to school, from school, church, you know. And these are young adults that are trusting God that one day they get married. But if you hear from me, you know, no, you can't talk to anybody, you can't befriend anybody type of things.
Yeah. I think it still goes back to what I was thinking of when it comes to expectation. You shouldn't put an expectation on your child such that you want them to turn out a certain type of way.
Okay.
Maybe because you've seen your colleagues' children,
Okay.
maybe they were intelligent in school and they look a certain type of way, or they look like the type that society will hold in high esteem.
Okay.
By hook or crook, you want your child to turn out that way.
Way.
You have to take those expectations of your children and
Okay.
really accept them the way they are.
Yeah.
Because you'd be surprised that they're parents who don't really know who their kids are. So
That's
maybe in the house their kids put up a front, just yes please mommy, and they go out and they speak a different type of language, and if anybody should have come to tell you that this is what your child did, you would have
You'd be
bet
surprised.
it's not your child. So taking that expectation off and realizing that every child is unique. I mean, well, it's just my child's just a baby, but I've even realized even with siblings, we're not all the same.
The same, yes.
One might be very academically inclined. One might be very good with social interaction.
Yeah.
Another person might have just a creative mind. Taking those expectations of our children and not putting them under so much pressure to be a certain type of person. You might want your child to, say, turn out to be a lawyer. You encourage them to go to school to study law. What if they go to school, study law, and come back and realize that it's still not what they want to do?
Okay.
Do you release them then to come into the world to pursue what they
want?
or you have to stick to that strict?
You have to be a lawyer.
Because that is what society accepts. So it's really for parents to take those expectations off, their children.
I think we have to do part 2 of this.
Yeah, so in running up today we were really blessed with this young, intelligent, now a mother, talking about youth and some of the things that we can really do to help our youth and the suicide and the depression. I love what you said, that don't put label on it. Because once you put label on it, it becomes something else. So I hope you have learned something. I hope it's going to be a blessing. Please continue to share the video with somebody. Let it be a blessing to somebody. I will try and come back to you once I'm here. But woman of God, in conclusion, what do you have to say to a young, adult or a youth watching? What their relationship with God, whatever. What do you have to tell them?
We all know that the human being is made up of our spirits, our souls, and our body. Recently, what I tell a lot of young people is that your spirit is more important than your body.
Okay.
What you feed yourself beyond what you look like is more important. So for young people, I would encourage them to invest into their spirits, invest in what is not seen. Because obviously with the trends nowadays, people are more invested in the physical and the outward and what can be seen so that you can get approval from your friends. But invest in your inner being, your spirit. Education, invest in yourself. With your relationship with God, spend time with God. Invest in your relationship with God. If you have to pray for a few minutes or an hour or how much your strength can take you, make sure that every single day you are making an investment in your spirit, because at the end of the day, that is what really counts.
Wow.
And that is what will take us on to eternity. Beyond the physical, beyond the body, beyond the trends and everything else that we can see. Make an investment in your spirit. At the end of the day, that's what really matters.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. I hope it has been a blessing to you. Continue to share the video, as I said. Is that the best thing, I always say here that the best thing that happened to my life was when I gave my life to Christ, and that has brought me this far. Your relationship with God will take you far. And in this year that God have given us this blank check to write whatever we want to write and to do whatever He have to do in our life, you want to make sure that your relationship with God is excellent. So thank you so much for joining me. I will try as much as possible to come back to you on this if I could get this wonderful woman of God again. All right. So thank you. God bless you. And go out there and be the powerful woman of influence and the powerful man of influence God has called you to be.